Can you please tell us the current situation of human trafficking in Las Vegas?
Well, from my perspective, the trafficking issue is at nearly an epidemic proportion. We're getting more and more young girls, and I use the term girls because of the age that we're looking at. And it's if we as a society and a community do not address it, we're going to be losing a lot of these young girls, going into young women, into prostitution, and to some very tragic results.
What are the age of these young girls?
We have seen victims as young as 11 in our courtrooms. And the traffickers or the pimps, as they're called sometimes, just trap these victims. And once they've got them, they threaten them, they beat them, they threaten their families and their loved ones. And it's a situation we have to address.
Can you explain more about the process that the pimps use to basically capture these girls?
Well, keep in mind that when we're young, we're all looking for something, and perhaps a young girl may have some self-esteem problems, and the pimps will recognize this, and they'll try to establish a friendship first, and keeping in mind that a young girl who thinks that she wants to be pretty, and someone tells her she's pretty, and will give her gifts, and she all of a sudden realizes she's important to somebody, and it flatters her ego. And before long, she thinks she's in love, or this person loves her, and she'll begin to do almost anything for this individual. And eventually, she'll make the first mistake and will leave her family, and then at that point, it's almost too late to realize that she's been trapped into a life that she cannot escape.
What is the oldest of the girls that you see also in this situation of human trafficking? The range?
Well, normally my emphasis has been under the age of 18, the juveniles in our justice system. Traditionally, they're 11, 12, 13, and 14 years of age. But many times the average entry into being trafficked is 14, and the life expectancy is 22. So it's a very, very short time span that we have to try to get these victims away from their traffickers and the situations that they find themselves in. And it's a difficult job.
Yes. Where do most of these girls come from?
Oh, well, there's a percentage that come from Nevada and the surrounding states. There'll be probably 60%, but they'll also come from around the country, and they'll come from across the border, from south of the border, not necessarily Mexico, although there are a lot of from Mexico, but it's Central and South America, and we'll get victims from the Pacific Rim, the Philippines, Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. In some of the poorer village in the Pacific Rim, there will be parents who actually sell daughters into traffickers. And so they'll come from all over the world.
How much does this, like, how much do the pimps benefit from this industry?
Oh, well, worldwide, human trafficking is the third highest illicit source of funding. Drugs is number one worldwide. Then you have weapons, it's number two, and then trafficking. It's approximately a $32 billion enterprise. They estimate probably by the year 2014 to 2015, it'll be the second most lucrative illicit source of funding. Because when you sell guns, you have to get more guns. You have to do something to replenish the supply. Drugs, again, you have to get more supply from wherever it is, from Afghanistan or south of the border to Colombia, the drugs or the cocaine and the heroin. But with human trafficking, your source is renewable. So we have had victims who have had to prostitute themselves 10 to 15 times a day, so 6 days a week. They track some girls here in the community. For an 18-month period, they average between $650,000 and $930,000 in an 18-month period. So there is a lot of money involved. That's the benefit for the traffickers. They don't get any social redeeming, benefits. I mean, there's nothing good benefits. They're all bad benefits. How can you traffic in a youngster's body and get a positive out of it? It's always a negative, but they benefit financially.
So who's responsible, basically, for the situation?
Well, we all would like to point fingers at the pimps. The demand is the problem. And we as a society are at fault. When we have businessmen come to our community, whether they're for conventions or trade shows, knowing that they're going to come to our community to buy or rent the bodies of these girls. We're all at fault. This is not a crime of happenstance or coincidence. A man can buy the services of an adult prostitute, perhaps for $200 or $300 or $400. The same services for an 11, 12, or 13-year-old can be $1,000, $1,500, or $2,000. So the demand is there, and these men that come to our community know it's going to cost them, and they plan on this. So again, we're all at fault for allowing this to happen without addressing it and doing something very, very strong to stop this epidemic.
So what can we do as a community to stop human trafficking?
Well, there's several things, and many of it is to go after the traffickers or the pimps. We need to penalize them financially. We need to put them in jail. But we also have to go after the buyers. If there were no buyers, there'd be no trafficking. So we need to punish the buyers that come to our community. And there's several different ways. We can go after them financially, make them pay substantially if they get caught and convicted of utilizing the services of a minor. We could label them as sexual predators, a label that they'd have to carry with them forever. And when they go back home to their communities, whether they're large cities or small towns around their country, they will have to take the fact that they are now sexual predators back home with that and let them explain to their wives and their families and their community why now they have been labeled. And they'll have to, registered with law enforcement wherever they live as sexual predators. We need to be very, very firm.
What would you suggest for like an individual? What could an individual do as far as preventing human trafficking or raising awareness about human trafficking?
Well, there is a society in the country called the Christopher Society. And basically one of the tenets, it's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. So each one of us can do something. But if there's enough individuals, we all of a sudden are not one, we're a community. I would suggest get involved with a faith-based community, or another social community that is trying to address this issue. Let your political leaders, whether it's in the state legislature or the county government or the city government, that you're concerned about this, call or write all the political leaders in those areas, your religious leaders, make sure that they talk about this from houses of worship. And we need to raise awareness on this situation. There are so many people that are ignorant of what's going on. Ignorance is a big enemy, and we need to defeat ignorance and then go on to the issue.
Since you're a politician here in Nevada, what is happening right now as far as in the legislative realm with human trafficking?
Luckily, there are some groups that are becoming more aware of it, and they're trying to help the Metropolitan Police Department. The State Attorney General has a group of people involved with... That's my pacemaker, I'm sorry.
Since when did that doorbell work? Do you belong to a church here? Or?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. Which church is that?
Nancy and I are Catholic. It's Elizabeth Ann Seton.
Oh, I was born Catholic.
Okay.
Actually, my father went to seminary school.
Okay.
And then, yeah, because he wanted to be a priest, but then he got a revelation from God, like, no, you need to have a family. A
Good.
family is your direction. So yeah, he left, and then he married a woman, not my mom, but she didn't want to have children. So then he divorced her, and then he married my mother.
Good.
And they have 5 kids.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. They
Whoa.
all live with my mom still in California.
Okay.
Southern California, that's where I'm from. I was born in Northern California.
Okay. Are you the oldest, middle,
I'm
youngest?
the eldest.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
So you will be the matriarch at some point.
Yes, yeah.
Are you close with your siblings?
I'm actually closest with my youngest.
Okay.
She's 20 years younger than I
Okay.
am. And I helped like.
So that means she's 4 or 5 right now.
Yeah, right. She's 14. Yeah, but I basically like helped raise her. So I feel like she's like she could be my child in a way. She's gonna be a freshman in high school, and then I'm just like, oh my gosh, she's almost as tall as me, gonna be taller probably than me, and I just felt like, wow, time just goes by so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it's nice to My father is deceased.
Okay.
Yeah. And my mom remarried because she's actually younger, 15 years younger than my father.
Okay.
But everybody, they all still live with my mom.
Well,
So, what are some of the laws that the legislation in Nevada are taking part in, or what's being passed, or what has been being done as far as human trafficking is concerned in the legislation?
well, now that we're in an interim, we're between legislative sessions in Nevada. So now there are several groups getting together, speaking with the Attorney General of Nevada, and there will be more laws or bills proposed, hopefully for consideration. One will be going after the penalties for the buyers, which I had mentioned previously, and also to perhaps label them as sexual predators, and amend some of the bills that I've been privileged to sponsor in the past to make it easier for our law enforcement community and our judicial community to punish both the traffickers and the buyers. So it should be a good session, I hope.
Can you be specific about those bills that have become laws?
Well, I was very fortunate in my first session in the Nevada State Legislature, which was 2009. There's an assembly bill, AB Assembly Bill 380, that went after the traffickers' money. And basically it provided that after conviction of pandering a juvenile under the age of 18, there would be civil penalties. So we could go after assets from 17 down to 14 to a value of up to $100,000. And then under the age of 14, the civil exposure went up to $500,000. So we are trying to do it. What we hope we'll do in the 2013 session, the session that's coming up, is to take away the ceiling. Right now, AB 380 starts at under 18. We want to just take that away. So basically, the civil exposure will start at anything of $100,000 will start at anyone over 14 all the way up, even into the adult prostitution here in Clark County. So we are going to try to go after the traffickers, both those who traffic in youngsters, but those who traffic in any adult area. And both, mainly women, 97, 98% are female, but there is a small percentage of males that are also victim. And we want to go after the buyers and the traffickers as best we can. And then in 2009, this very last session, Assembly Bill, or AB Bill 6, allowed the victims that were adult victims of trafficking to go into court because most victims have been arrested, charged, and convicted of a crime involving prostitution, solicitation of prostitution, and many times other crimes, petty theft and what have you, because they have to maintain themselves. Well, now they can petition the court to have a hearing. Not a trial, but a hearing, because they've already been convicted. But now they can go in and ask the court to look at their convictions, and if they can convince the court that they are victims of trafficking, the court now under state law has the opportunity to vacate their arrest and convictions. And to vacate, basically, it's to erase, to do away with. Many times you will have juveniles in other areas that they can seal a record. But if someone can seal a record, they can unseal it. But when a record is vacated, it's gone, as it never happened. And this would benefit the victims because it would allow them to apply for education benefits, apply for jobs, and if there's an application process, and somewhere in the application process there's a question, have you ever been arrested or convicted? They can say no and not be lying because their conviction has been vacated as if it never happened. And so this is a real benefit. And I'm dealing now with some victim advocacy groups of the adult victims, and we're trying to line up some attorneys. And there are several women that want to avail themselves of AB 6, and I'm very hopeful. And it received very high praise, and I'm very fortunate of that, from the entire community. It passed unanimously, and so many different groups were glad to see this. Now, hopefully, there's many more issues we have to address, but we're taking one step at a time. But they're very solid steps addressing this issue, and we'll just keep on going.
Great. About how many victims are there, human trafficking victims are there in Las Vegas?
Well, on an average, there's about, they asked about 400 juveniles, prostitutes, and victims. And I like to use the term victim because even our federal government, anyone under 18 is called a victim and not a prostitute. But that number can increase significantly if a large convention or trade show comes into town, because then the traffickers will bring in more victims into town to address the needs. As an example, the United States in football has the Super Bowl. And, hundreds of thousands of people will come into a community that has a Super Bowl. Or if there's a World Series championship or basketball championship in a particular town, the traffickers will bring the victims into that community. And so the number is not constant. It does fluctuate somewhat, and normally higher when we have larger conventions and trade shows.
Can you tell us what the percentage of demand is for juveniles compared to adults, victims?
Well, the demand, as far as percentage, it's difficult. Basically, it will rely and be dictated on how much money the buyers have to spend or how much they want to spend. If you have a buyer that has several $100s, they'll probably be looking at an adult, but someone that will come into town that has thousands of dollars. They are very apt to go after juveniles and some very young for whatever evil, and it is evil means. I mean, it's just, there is a battle of good and evil in our communities, and I think trafficking is one of the evil things that we have to go after, and evil is trying to fight good.
Definitely. Can you tell us who these buyers are?
They're everybody. They're businessmen who run small businesses. They're corporate executives. They're plumbers, mechanics, lawyers. They're you and I from all over the country that come in our community. They don't have special markings. They don't have tattoos on themselves. They're just ordinary people. So they're everybody.
I have a question about the pimps. How many pimps are there in Las Vegas?
I have no way of knowing that. It's a difficult question because, again, there's rivalries, and occasionally there'll be homicides to amongst their own community to take over, turf battles, turf wars, and sometimes they're not. But the numbers are difficult to catalog. The police department has identified some set ones that have records, but as new ones come into town from around the country because of the trade shows and conventions, so that number will increase. And I occasionally will draw a difference between a trafficker and a pimp. And this is for my purposes. Normally a pimp has maybe one or two victims, but they still traffic in human bodies. But sometimes the term traffickers, they could have a stable, so to speak. They could have 5, 10, or 15. So I personally draw a distinction. The law does not draw a distinction, but I do.
And could you offer a reason why these pimps choose to be a pimp?
No, I mean, we can have a philosophical discussion, but there's control over these victims. There's a lot of money, the greed. And most of them are not stupid because they have to be very clever to avoid arrest and the consequences of laws, whether they're in Nevada or around the country. They certainly should be able to put their talent and their intellect to better use. They choose not to. As I said earlier, this is not a crime of coincidence. This is a crime that's very well thought out and calculated. They planned this crime. And what makes a man want to destroy the heart and soul of another human being? I have no idea, and so it's an enigma to me. It's a mystery.
Where do these pimps find the girls, and how?
Oh, in Nevada, particularly in Las Vegas, there is not a high school in our community that does not have a victim of human trafficking. Many times in our society, you'll see movies where the pimps will go to bus stations and things like that and look for runaways, and that's true. You can go to the bus station here in Las Vegas and sit there all day, and you can tell the victims, potential victims, getting off the buses. And if you walk around and just look at the area, you'll be able to tell the pimps, and they will latch on to these young women or these girls very, very quickly. And it's a segment of our society that not enough is known, at least to the general public. Law enforcement has a lot of intelligence, but we need to open up the windows and turn on some lights and let the rest of society see how evil this situation is.
What do you think would be the best effective way to do that, to really raise awareness in the community?
Well, I don't think there's any one way to do it. I think as a society, we need to use our faith-based community. We need to use our colleges and universities and dedicated young men and women that are adverse to this. We need to let our politicians know we will not stand for it. We need to have marches, and we need to have the religious leaders of our community talk from their pulpits, from the churches, the synagogues, and the mosque about this situation. It has to be a multi-tier attack on this. Just to do one thing will not be enough because they'll adapt. So it has to be, all of us have to be involved. Not just one single force, but all of us as a community and as a society in general have got to fight this situation.
What happens to these girls once they are caught by the system? What happens to them afterwards?
Well, sadly, a large majority, when they're released, they go right back to the pimps because at some point they're reluctant to go back home, or they can't because they're runaways or throwaways from their homes. Many might have had physical or mental abuse in their homes. Many because of a mother that might be a single parent and has a boyfriend. They'll view their daughters as a competition with the new man in their lives, if you want to use your term man. And so they'll run away. But very few can get the counseling and the mental health assistance that they need to get out of this way of life. And we're losing that battle because if they don't go back to The same pimp, they'll go back to another pimp because they've lost all self-esteem and self-respect, and they don't know anything else. And a lot of them are branded. They're pieces of property at some point, and then they view themselves as pieces of property, like this chair I'm sitting in, or this glass of water that I may have at my disposal. They become things, and not people. So.
Would you consider Las Vegas to be a hub of human trafficking, or if not, who is the number one city in America for human trafficking?
Well, obviously, I believe that we are a hub, and nationally, we're very, very high on the list. But the very large cities, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, they all have the same problems. Las Vegas's problem is very seasonal or cyclical because of the conventions and the trade shows that come in. But it's always high because we have so many tourists that come into town. But any large community, Minneapolis, St. Paul, I mean, anywhere in the country, you can point your finger. But we seem to be leading the pack, unfortunately.
Okay, hold on. Did you have any more questions? Okay. Okay. So what is the way forward from here? How can you see this improving in our community?
Well, we've made 2 small steps, but to throw your question back, the way forward is never to turn around, never stop, even if it is 1 step at a time. But we have got to keep on moving on this issue. We have got to attack it day in and day out, and take pride in our small victories. Rejoice in larger victories, but just do not stop. If we just can get 1 victim rescued, we've accomplished something, hopefully. And if we can get 1 trafficker out of the system, whether it's in jail or something, we need to celebrate that. There'll be other traffickers that will come up, and there'll be other victims, but we can only do those things that we can do. We can rescue those that we can do it 1 at a time, and punish the buyers and the traffickers, but we must not stop. We just can't stop.
Did I ask you about about the quantity of girls? Like how many girls would you say are victims of human trafficking in Las Vegas?
Well, not to be flippant, not to, but too many.
Too many.
Too many. But we think several hundred on any given evening could be walking the streets of our community, and that number will grow. But it is very difficult because many of the victims will come and go depending on the time of year in Nevada, particularly in Las Vegas. But they have the problem up in our northern part of our state in Reno, and some of the other smaller communities in our state where our interstate highway systems go through, and the truckers. So there are problems there. But because certain times of the year are very hot, particularly in southern Nevada, the temperature gets very warm, and so they may not be out there as much, but they're always there.
Where are the brothels in Las Vegas?
Well, that's an easy question. There are no brothels in Las Vegas because prostitution is illegal in Las Vegas, which is within Clark County. Okay. Our level of government, we have the county. There are 17 counties in Nevada. Only 1 county is illegal by state law, and that's Clark County, or the city of Las Vegas. Reno, which is in Washoe County, and 1 other county, I forgot which one was. It's by local ordinance rather than by state law. It's local ordinance, and it's a local issue. So the nearest county to us that has brothels is Nye County, and that's Pahrump in the area, and Tonopah, which is one of the major traffic ways, throughways, to get to northern Nevada. But where do these girls practice? You hate to say practice. Where are the victims? This act occurred. Every hotel in our community, whether it's the highest rated hotel in our community or a small off the strip motel, they are all over. These victims can go into some of the finest properties in our community, and they will be taken to their buyers. And so there are a lot of people that know this does not occur in a vacuum. There are people in our community that are making money off this. And I'm not going to name any particular property or casino or hotel, but there are employees from the driveway to the front door to the registration desk to the elevators all the way up that know this is occurring and are profiting off this. Cab drivers, they are all in the chain, profit from this. And it's a true shame. It's a blight on our society.
How can we stop that chain? How can we break that link in that chain?
Well, some of my legislation, and I'm proposing, I'm having some people write it up. We can go after those that do this, that facilitate, and punish the facilitators by taking something away that they value, whether it's a liquor license, gambling license, a cigarette license, but punish the property owners as their employees do these things, and make it hurt. Instead of just a mosquito sting, make it a wasp sting. Let them know it happened, and let that punishment increase every time it occurs after the first time. But we have to attack this on several different fronts, not just the victims, not just the pimps, not just the buyers, but even those that facilitate. We've got a very full plate, and we've got to attack all of it.
Can you explain about the balance between punishment and rehabilitation?
Well, my personal background is law enforcement, and I worked with our federal government for 30 years in several different areas. So I'm very strong in the punishment area for the traffickers and the buyers, because they know what they're doing. They plan it, they plan to benefit, and they plan to spend their money. I'm not nearly as harsh on the victims. An adult prostitute, maybe a little bit, but these juveniles, they were tricked, coerced, kidnapped. No one goes into this way of life willingly. They're coerced or tricked, and once they're in it, they can't get out. So if we can help them get away from their trafficker, get them the mental health rehabilitation that they need, find family members somewhere that still cherish and love these victims, their extended grandparents or uncles, and if that's not available, will someone in the community step forward and care for these victims, after they've gone through some training and rehabilitation, and realize that they are of value, to try to help relieve their self-esteem and self-respect, and let them realize that they were victims, that they didn't choose this, they were forced into it. So we've got to do something, so to speak euphemistically, I've got a very big hammer to hit certain peoples, but that hammer is being held by velvet glove to help these victims. So there's a disparity perhaps in the way I think, but I think we as a society need to look at the victims entirely different from the buyers and the traffickers.
Are the pimps the same as the mafia?
Well, your term mafia just indicates organization, and the answer is yes. They know each other, particularly those that have been pimps or traffickers for a long time, or rivals amongst themselves. They know each other, and they cooperate in certain areas. So I don't want to put an ethnicity, because normally when we talk about the mafia, there's a certain ethnicity involved with that, and I'm not going to do that. Many times we see movies that have a certain ethnicity to the pimps and the traffickers. That's not my job, because pimps and traffickers run the gamut, from being of a particular race and ethnicity, from being highly educated to not being educated. They run the gamut. But no, I just want to go after them individually and as a group, but not as ethnicity. That's not fair for us to do that.
Okay, you were speaking earlier about the hotels and how their involvement in human trafficking. The hotel industry sees it as probably like a business opportunity to increase business funds. But what do you expect the hotels to do to stop this?
Well, I would hope they don't see it as a business opportunity. I think they see it more as allowing some of their clientele, and we have the term high rollers, those that come in and their individuals are very wealthy, whether they're from our country or from around the world, and they will let their wishes be known. And hopefully no one in hotel management, senior officers of the hotel or the property, but someone will realize that what they want, and there's money to be had, either through tips or gratuities or through the traffickers paying off. But I think the hotel industry needs to let their clientele realize that they want the high rollers. They want people to come and enjoy themselves. But they will not be involved in the trafficking of children. I don't think I will ever be able to stop or make a dent in adult prostitution, because many times the victims of prostitution, whether they're in their 20s or perhaps their 30s, they must realize themselves that there's a problem, and to make an effort to get out. The youngsters do not have that option. They're trapped, they're fearful for themselves. Many of them are beaten, and there are horrific acts done against them. So, but we need to let the hotel industry, and there are associations within the hotel industry, and we're making inroads there. And I think it'll happen, but to say that they, as a management policy, are involved, I think would be an error. But I think there's people who realize that they want to help the high rollers if they have wishes and desires, as evil as they may be. There will be people that will facilitate that.
How do they go about advertising the girls and promoting the girls?
Oh, you don't have to advertise at all. It's word of mouth. And when you drive around our community and see the ads for escorts, you go into the telephone book, into the yellow pages or the advertising pages of our telephone books, and there will be escort services, the services of a masseuse, and there's massage parlors all over our community. And many of the employees there, if you want to call them employees, are underage, and prostitution occurs there. The city of Las Vegas, and there's a difference between the city of Las Vegas and Clark County, because not the strip itself is not within the city of Las Vegas. It's downtown on Fremont Street, which I call Old Las Vegas, is the city in other areas. But the city of Las Vegas is going very strongly after the massage parlors to try to go after the business licenses and require certain things occur that would help make prostitution more difficult in the massage parlors. So, but the restaurant association or the resort community, I think, want to get involved and let people know, come have fun. spend money, and we'll treat you well, particularly if you're a high roller, but we're just not here to facilitate the buying and renting of our young girls or boys.
How can we tell that a woman is being trafficked? What are the signs?
Oh, boy. Normally, the younger victims, those that are still in school or have not dropped out, it's very much like watching for the signs of substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or drugs. If they're good students, their grades will start going down. If they have a close-knit family, they'll start drawing away from their family. If they have a lot of friends, particularly young girls, sometimes have a group of friends, and they giggle and laugh and they hang together. Well, as a victim, will start pulling away from that because their trafficker is convincing them that all these people are against them and are not doing. Only the trafficker loves them, only cares for them. Everyone else is unimportant. And so, if you see a child, a friend, a relative, grades start going down and they start withdrawing within themselves, a change in dress, a young girl starting to have clothing that routinely she or he could not afford, makeup, an attitude toward life, and vocalizing this, all little warning signs, but many times we just don't pay attention.
What can parents do, or people who do, encounter a girl that's being trafficked? What can they do to, report that or bring it to?
Well, within our communities, we have areas we call 911, where you can call the police, call social services, call a counselor at school, reach out to the community, and there will be a response. We're becoming more and more aware of this as a community. Several years ago, we may not have done a good job, but we're getting better at it. So if a friend thinks there's a problem, particularly in school, go to the school counselors. If within the home environment, reach out to the religious community, the faith-based community, social services. Even if you could go to a nearby hospital privately and say you talk to the doctors or something. We're becoming more and more aware. Just don't be silent and say think it's a phase. We need to intervene and have someone sit down, a professional sit down and talk to these youngsters and be more aware of what's going on.
What do you think is the responsibility of religious leaders in our community?
They have a heavy burden. They have a lot of their congregation that has many needs, marital needs, other substance abuse that they have to counsel. But those that are Christian, in our Bible, the lost sheep, the good shepherd. So if the shepherd rejoices for the finding and rescuing of one lamb. And I believe, and I believe in my faith, and I believe that God in His infinite wisdom will help those that are trying to fight this issue, because good must triumph over evil. But I think the faith-based community, particularly the leaders, the priests, the pastors, the rabbis, the imams, must educate themselves as they go through school and get theological degrees in different counseling degrees. They probably have never or very rarely had an emphasis on how to address human trafficking and how to address particularly the very young, the 11, 12, and 13-year-olds, and how to address and grab their interest, and whether through Sunday school or intense counseling with their parents and as a family. But the religious community must educate themselves, and they must start speaking out, and not just yearly, quarterly, but almost daily, whether it's from their pulpit or their bulletins or in their Sunday schools. Many have Sunday schools even for adults. This has got to be an area that they talk about, and let it always be in the forefront. Always be in the forefront.
That's it. Do you guys have any other questions?
Okay. There goes that internet again.
Yeah. Okay, what do you think of the relationship between human trafficking and domestic violence?
I think there is a relationship. I think many times a youngster will try to escape domestic violence and would turn to a trafficker, because particularly if the young girl or the young boy, a young woman, young man, feels that the trafficker cares about them and will treat them well or loves them. It's not true, but they feel that to get out of an abusive relationship. And as I said earlier, that many of these victims are runaways. Well, they're running away from something, whether it's an abusive parent, an abusive boyfriend of a parent, a single parent and their boyfriend or girlfriend of is abusive. So they're trying to escape, and they'll run right into a situation that they have no knowledge of and eventually will have no control. So I think domestic violence plays a role, and probably a fairly large one, for the youngsters. Yeah.
Okay, and when and how did you determine to stand for fighting against human trafficking?
Oh, it was 5 or 6 years ago. I have been involved with youth issues for nearly 40 years, and eventually I knew I wanted to be involved in politics. And prior to me running for political office for the state legislature, I had someone approach me and ask for a meeting, and I've known the individual for several years, and we met for lunch, and he started talking about human trafficking, and I had no knowledge about it. I mean, I knew about prostitution in our community, but never realized the extent and how it affected youngsters. And it affected me. I've got a daughter of my own, and I know what I'd do if someone tried to harm my daughter, but I will not preach that today, but I know what I would do. But I was bound and determined, should I win election, that I would want to address this issue, and I won election. And then I had to live up to my promise to myself, and sat down and wrote my first piece of legislation. Pretty much wrote it myself, and AB 380, going after the traffickers, and we talked about it very early in the interview. And then I had a few people change some wording, and I invited all these comments, because the more eyeballs, so to speak, or more fingerprints on this issue, the better for the issue. And I was very, very fortunate. In the assembly, Nevada has a two-tier legislative, a state senate and a state assembly. It passed unanimously in both houses of our legislature. And then Governor Gibbons proudly signed it, and we had a news conference here about it, and the media, they had a lot of coverage. I was very pleased and honored that it went through, and so we just have to keep on going. I'm not going to stop. You know, we can't. Shame on us. Shame on all of us. Because I think, again, going back more in our faith, all of our faiths individually, that we will be judged very harshly by our Creator if we do not something about this. And I think we'll be judged even harsher by the victims as they grow older, and will ask us as a society, why did you not help us? Why did you not come forward? And I think when we die and go before God Almighty, He's going to ask us a few questions. And one, what are the good things you've done? And He will have to explain. He'll have the answers already, but we'll have to explain. And I think He'll want to say, well, if you didn't succeed, what did you do? And He's going to want to hear us tell Him and that we kept on trying. We didn't stop. We may not win every battle. We don't. We're finite beings, but we can't stop. And I think our Creator wants us to keep fighting. He has told us that in Scripture, regardless of the Scripture we look at, whether it's the Torah, the Quran, or the Bible. And many of us believe that these documents are written with the inspiration of God. And he's trying to tell us that we've got to take care of our own. We have particularly youngsters. Just sort of a funny side note, a little story, if I may. When AB 380 was going through, and again in the lower house, it passed unanimously, and I had to testify in our state senate about this issue. And I was received very warmly. But one of the senators was also a minister up in northern Nevada. And we were talking about the bill. And he asked me if there was anything else that I would like to have on the bill. And I gave him a sort of a teasing answer. Well, in St. Matthew, in the Bible, and I am no biblical scholar, but I believe in chapter 24, I think, God, or Jesus Christ mentions, woe is he who harms the youngest of our children. And that best that a millstone be cast around their neck than to be thrown in the depths of the ocean. And he knew. He gave me the exact quote. I said, yeah, I was going to add that to the bill, but the American Civil Liberties Union objected to it. There's a good laugh, but it just drives the point home. There are other things we need to do, but we have to be realistic on what we can accomplish, and we just do it one day at a time.
How do you think the religious community and the religious leaders can work together with the government and really fight this topic together? Do you think that would be a powerful union?
I think it would be. Yeah, absolutely. There are some issues that the civil authority perhaps will not be involved with, and religion in our secular community and in religious community. But this is not one of them. This is one where I think a partnership would benefit all of us. It certainly would, in the long term, lower the conviction rate and the problems we have in mental health issues amongst youngsters. And addressing this issue would eliminate a lot of crime, getting rid of the pimps, the buyers, and the victims themselves, because there's auxiliary crimes as they try to maintain themselves. I think there would be an overall benefit to all of society. And this would be a perfect one. And Christians believe that when Jesus Christ was walking this earth and people were challenging him on what he was trying to do in his day, and about taxes, because the tax collectors were frowned upon and they were not liked, and they're still not liked today. But he grabbed a coin of the realm, a Roman coin, and he looked at it and he says, "Give to Caesar those things that are Caesar's, but give to God those things are God." And I believe the spirit and soul of our youngsters belong to God, and we need it as a society to address that issue, or we are going to be very, very sorry.
Yeah, I feel like personally that the spiritual, our children are dying spiritually, basically, in this society. So it's something that...
And it's not a quick death. It takes months. It's very slow to watch the spirit and the will die in a youngster. It's not a pretty sight.
That's right. Okay, any last words you would like to...
No, but for those that are listening to this, I hope they appreciated some of the comments and questions and answers. But in the bottom line, they are going to, after they view this interview, they're going to have to turn around and decide whether they want to be involved. I hope the answer is yes.
Okay. That's it. Cuts.
Cut.
Good. Thank you so much.
That's all right.
Hold on.